What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode here of the Met Central podcast. And we have good news to talk about as the spring has been going underway. A couple of pitchers shining, a couple of position players shining, but we also have bad news with some injuries that have either lingered or that have appeared since we last did an episode. But this will be probably the last episode talking mostly about spring training. Next week, we'll do a little bit of spring training talk, but next week's going to mostly be just prediction stuff, whether it's Mets related, MLB related. We are going to give all that stuff. So, yeah, on your way in, though, as we're going to talk about all of the spring training stuff in this episode, a bulk of the conversation there. Be sure to leave a like on your way in, subscribe if you guys are new to the channel, especially if you're Met fans, and turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live on the channel. But how are we feeling as opening day is it's 2 weeks from Thursday, which is pretty insane.
2 weeks from Thursday, and we finish up spring training, the last game against the Yankees, and then the team packs up and goes to Houston for a three-game set against the Marlins, and then back home for the home opener against the Toronto Blue Jays for a three-game set. So the season's coming. Spring training has been really good so far. I got to be honest, this is the most locked in I've probably been on a spring training since ever. Because usually spring training, I watch the first 5 games and I'm like, yeah, enough of this. But but this spring training, especially with all the hidden gems that David Stearns has found on the pitching side, and just seeing Juan Soto and guys like that, take at bats. It's like it's been really interesting. It's been a really fun spring training. Yeah, I've been extremely locked in on this one. But yeah, I mean, listen, we're a couple weeks away. The weather started to warm up here in New York. It's a nice sunny day, like 60 degrees, no clouds in the sky. So baseball's coming and spring's coming, and I can't wait.
Yeah, same with me with the spring training part. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm not going to act and say that I've been watching a lot of spring training this year, but definitely more than I usually do as well, just because of the excitement. And what a surprise when you actually have competition. It's worth watching these games versus the previous years where their depth is Keon Broxton, Albert Almora Jr., and whatever other crap they were throwing at us. This year, it's actually fun to watch the competition of who's going to win, some of the final bench spots, to see, who potentially is going to be in the bullpen, who's going to be in the rotation, which it's not as fun, the rotation side of things, just because of the injuries there. And now we have a new competition that will appear as, we'll segue into the bulk of the conversation here. The thing that we're probably going to talk about the most is the injury that came up a couple of days ago, maybe, or was it yesterday, whatever it was. Francisco Alvarez had to get surgery for that left hand, and it's weird how it just came out of nowhere. He is going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks, and that's without baseball activity. So realistically, you're probably looking at an early June return, and that is the earliest, because by the time he gets back and just holding a bat again, if he's in that 6 week time frame, we're already going to be in the middle of April here, end of April, and then he's got a rehab, and that might take about a month or month and a half. So it's going to take a bit for him to get to game speed. So I'd say maybe the earliest is end of May, actually. And, the latest, the middle of June for Alvarez, if there's no setbacks there, which we hope for not. But yeah, your thoughts with the Alvarez injury before I, give mine and we talk about some options that they might have to look into.
It's unfortunate. I think for Francisco Alvarez, this was a guy who at least I talked about it like a couple podcasts ago, or maybe last podcast, but this is a big year for Francisco Alvarez. And I'm not saying that, if Francisco Alvarez has a bad season this year, he's going to be labeled a bust, but he really kind of needs a nice, really solid season and listen, I don't need the batting average to be up around 300 or anything, but I need the batting average from him to at least be around 250, 260. And the main thing I really want from Alvarez, and the main reason why we were excited for him to come up and one day be the Mets catcher every day, and playing every day, is the power. Because we noticed in 2023, when he came up, because when Omar Narvaez came up, Alvarez of course had to come up and take his spot, and you noticed the power from Alvarez right away. He was hitting a lot of home runs, and also the defense was really good too, which which a lot of people in the Mets system talked shit about Francisco Alvarez's defense, but when he came up here, I mean, he was amazing defensively. And then 2024, kind of it was a weird season for Alvarez because he had stretches where he was really hot and he was just mashing the ball, hitting home runs. And then there was points of the season where, I mean, we saw it even beginning of the playoffs where the guy just looked lost at the plate and he couldn't hit, the outside breaking ball. And it was an all over the place season. But, coming into his third full year, you finally want to see some consistency from Alvarez in terms of, plate approach and what you're seeing in terms of production. And this kind of setback and this kind of injury does suck. I mean, I did notice earlier in spring training he wasn't doing the best. I don't know if that was the injury necessarily affecting him, because that was also another thing that I forgot to mention from last year was, the injuries. I mean, he had the two injuries. He had the thumb injury on which he suffered in LA during a series in May, and I forgot the other injury, but yeah, he had two different types of injuries last year. So I don't know if this current injury, the one he just suffered, was affecting him all spring training, because I think it was Mendoza said it that he was taking live ABs on the backfields and he said he kind of felt it. So I don't know if he got it. I don't know if he sustained it during doing live batting practice, or was this just kind of lingering and he was just kind of putting off to the side. That I don't know, and I would kind of like to figure that out and know, but we probably won't know that. But yeah, just unfortunate. But the good thing is that we have a solid backup catcher in Luis Torrens. Now, listen, I'm not saying Luis Torrens is Johnny Bench or Mike Piazza behind the plate, but you know what? When you look back at years past at Mets backup catchers, Luis Torrens is a hell of an upgrade. I mean, you go back to the years, you had guys like Rene Rivera, Kevin Plawecki, Omar Narvaez, Tomas Nido. And, when those guys were starting, it was basically a lost cause because they were average to bad defensive behind the plate, and they couldn't hit a ball to save their lives. Now, listen, Luis Torrens, what I really like about him, like Alvarez, solid defensively. And the one upside that he does have over Alvarez is he has a much better arm than Alvarez. We saw it many times before, and we even saw it a couple times in spring training so far, where if a guy's going to steal or a pickoff at first base, boom, you know, Torrens has a really good arm and he could pick off runners. And, all around blocking too, solid. And then even with the bat, like I said, Luis Torrens is not going to go up there mashing and hitting home runs and hitting for our average. But you know what? He's reliable up at the plate. You can count on him, here and there to come up with a big hit. And he has shown some power in the past. So like I said, it sucks for Alvarez because you wanted a nice, solid, consistent season from him, but at least for the fact that the Mets have a solid guy, Luis Torrens, you could say, okay, he can hold down the fort for the first about a month and a half, 2 months, 6 to 8 weeks of injury, and then when Alvarez is fully back, he can come and take over that spot.
Yeah. So similar to what you're saying in terms of just they've got they've dealt with worse. Like this team won 101 games with James McCann and Tomas Nido being the catching tandem. To put in perspective, how again it sucks because of the reasons that you laid out. That this was really a big year for Alvarez because you really wanted to see him take the step forward, especially after the fact that it seems like Eric Chavez told him no to hitting for power, which is even more of a concern. But either way, I'd imagine that part of why his bat hasn't looked so good this spring thus far is because of the fact that it's lingering, which I'm with you. I'd love to know how this happened, but I'm not worried with Torrens having the catch for a month or two. I think they could survive with that. It's really more of a concern of where they go with the third catcher here, because if they brought back, because I've seen people say bring back Tomas Nido, if they did that as a third catching option, it's fine. Like the problem is that most of these guys that they had in the past were starting catchers for this team. Like Tomas Nido is platooning with James McCann. You would have Tomas Nido starting games for this team most of the time. So if they could find that, which it's going to be interesting to see, where they go. And on cue, Reitz hit a grand slam yesterday as the injury dropped. So yeah, that actually was yesterday because I remember that it was the same day he hit that grand slam.
It was 2 days ago.
Oh, it's 2 days ago.
Yeah, 2 days
My
ago.
timeline's messed up. Everything's all over the place right now. But yeah, this felt like the year where it was, yeah. Now with Eric Chavez as the hitting coach, he's never healthy. FBI watch, but yeah, and I agree with what this comment says that Alvarez is a concern with his injuries because it's the same. This is the same hand as last year, right? that he's injured?
Yeah,
Because
because I remember it was when he slid at Dodger Stadium. I think it was it was on his left hand, so his left thumb.
yeah,
I'm
his
not
left
sure.
thumb. I'm looking right now at the injury report. So
Okay,
it's
yeah.
the same exact hand as last year, which is it's concerning that this is all of a sudden showing up again. But yeah, it sucks because this was the make or break year for Alvarez in some ways. He is only 23, but it does bring up the question in terms of where you want to go about an extension potentially because of the fact that I think every Met fan's been on board to do what the Atlanta Braves do and to give Alvarez that type of extension where you're banking on the how he's going to be long term by signing him at a potential discount, but you do run the risk of if he doesn't pan out, then you're stuck with that contract. Now you got to question if you want to do that because he's already getting hurt a good amount. And the only thing I'll say is that at least it's not, for now at least, knock on wood, all that stuff. It's not leg injuries and stuff because then we'd have real concerns because of him squatting behind the dish for as many games as he's going to. But it is definitely a concern nonetheless. And you have to question where they go in terms of an extension potentially with Alvarez. But it sucks. It really does because this was the year where I really thought he would take that step forward and he would be, a very productive bat in the lineup. But we're going to have to wait until later on in the year to find that out.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I agree with you. It still sucks that it's a lingering injury in his thumb and in his hand, but like you said, it could have been a lot worse if this was a reoccurring injury with the knees and the legs. Because as a catcher, you're squatting behind there for a lot of innings throughout the year, and in terms of his defense, blocking balls, framing, you do need your legs. I mean, you need your legs for everyday activities, but you need your legs for those cases too. But even then, I guess kind of now with the designated hitter in the National League, he could always become a DH, but then you kind of have yourself a stubbier and shorter Giancarlo Stanton who can't run at that point. But yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, my biggest concern with this of everything that I didn't even bring up, but it just clicked with me to bring up is how this is going to affect the pitching staff because we know the pitchers love to throw to Alvarez. I mean, every single pitcher talks about how great he is behind the plate, and like you said before with the defense, how it was a concern coming up. A lot of these pitchers throw better with him behind the plate, and Torrens isn't bad defensively by any means, but there's something to be said about the comfortability with these pitchers and Alvarez. The only good news is there's been some turnover with the pitching staff where, Clay Holmes is at least, new to the rotation. Peterson, I don't know what the split was last year with how much he had each catcher. Senga didn't get to throw to Torrens last year. So, you have to worry there. Paul Blackburn, I'm convinced he's going to suck no matter who he throws to, so that really doesn't affect me. Griffin Canning hasn't thrown to Alvarez, at least in regular season games, but I do worry about that either way, just because these pitchers do throw better to Francisco Alvarez, but that's where I wonder if they're going to look more for a defensive first catcher than a guy that's more offensive because it would be nice to have the additional offense, but they might need the defense right now with the way that the pitchers are more comfortable with Alvarez compared to Torrens.
Yeah, no, definitely, and it's going to be interesting to see where David Stearns goes from this. Obviously, does he sign a guy who's a backup catcher? I don't even know who the backup catchers are, even left in free agency, or do you go through the trade market and, like you said, get a guy like Tomas Nido? But I guess the thing is, losing Alvarez definitely sucks with the bat because, like I said, he hasn't been consistent really with the offense so far. 23, he showed the home run power, and then you saw the power numbers totally decrease in 2024. And when you're looking down the lineup and you see that nice, 6 or 7 hole wherever they put him, and you see a guy like Francisco Alvarez there, okay, not too much pressure on the kid, but if I need him in a big time at bat, I know that he definitely is a power threat. But this is also why you look at the top of the lineup and you say, oh, we got some very good insurance at the top of the lineup with guys like Lindor, Soto, Pete. Vientos, and Nimmo. Those are the main guys that you can rely on. And then when you look at the bottom half, even though the bottom half definitely for the couple past years for the Mets team, they have been inconsistent because there's some points where the bottom of the lineup is clicking on all cylinders, and then there's some point where the bottom of the lineup is just an automatic out every time. So it would have been nice to have that insurance guy in Alvarez down there in the lineup batting, like I said, either sixth or seventh. But knowing that you have the comfortability of your top guys, your superstar guys, if they produce, I think this lineup should ultimately be fine.
Yeah, and this puts even more pressure on, whoever wins the second base job, whether it's our great friend Jeff McNeil or whether it's Luis Angel Acuna. There's more pressure on those guys now to thrive, and Jose Siri getting off to a good start, as well as someone like Tyrone Taylor, who's potentially going to get some at bats. So it's going to be crucial for those guys to step up and perform in the absence of Alvarez and the depth of the lineup, which is why I say the defense might be more of the concern here. And in terms of the catching options available, you got good old buddy James McCann,
Nope.
Luke Maley, who's an average defender at best, and Yasmani Grandal, whose legs probably are barely even holding up at this point. But there is the fact that he might be a better bat than some of these other options available. That's really about it. They're probably going to have to look the trade market like they did last year when they found Torrens and ended up, just taking a guy that was a third catcher of another team and making it work. Whether that is Tomas Nido bringing him back, I'm not sure who else. I'd have to go through rosters and look at potentially some third catchers available. But, in my opinion, I think the best route to go is to find a good defensive catcher if they go external, because internal, the options are really not there. You could go with Reitz, who has major league experience, but there's really not a lot of it. Hayden Sanger's really the only other option who does not have any major league experience, but he's been in the system for quite a bit now. Didn't do bad at AAA last year at the back, was a league average, below league average hitter slightly, but those are your options if you don't go external. And this is one of those things where they might have to look external because it could be a 2-month thing without Alvarez, and if you don't have him for 2 months, it's going to be tough to survive with Torrens and one of these internal options for that long. But unless Torrens is able to catch an absurd amount of games.
What's Patrick Mazeika doing these days? Is he interested in backing up again? No, I don't know, but
Actually,
yeah,
curious.
I mean, reading off the names like you just said on the free agent market, James McCann, absolutely not. I never want to see that guy anywhere near the borough of Queens ever again.
I don't think
Yasmani
he'd come back anyway.
yeah, Yasmani Grandal. I mean, like you said, the bat might be there, but the defense is done, and he's shot. I don't want Grandal either. And Luke Maley, like, I guess if you had to get him, sure, but I think probably the most obvious path that the Mets are going to go down and Stearns are going to go down is the trade market, because we know Stearns is capable of finding those gems. I mean, Luis Torrens, I mean, he was the Yankees' third catcher last year, fourth catcher, and the Mets got him for cash consideration. So thanks to the Yankees, and thank you, Brian Cashman, for giving us an absolute gem in Luis Torrens. But yeah, listen, I'm not saying you got to go find another gem like Luis Torrens, but at least someone stable back there to at least split time, or even if Luis Torrens gets 75% of the time through the first 2 months, and then the so-called backup catcher gets 25% of the time. So yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I could say too is that we did hear, I think it was Steve Cohen. It was one of Steve Cohen or David Stearns that were on some podcast, and they brought up the fact that they got the pitching lab figured out. Now they want to get the hitting lab really figured out. This is really your chance to potentially, show that here, because with the absence of Alvarez's offense, you're going to need to find your offense somewhere in this lineup. And I'm not just talking about if they pick up a catcher or just with Torrens. I'm talking about just getting more production from the bottom of the order, because last year at points that was an issue where you just were not getting that production at all from the bottom of the order. So it's going to be crucial for them to find that. And hopefully they do figure out the hitting lab, if you will, just to help out with that, because it is definitely going to be a concern there. And yeah, these are the names available, like we went over, but not a lot exciting there at all. Really, not a lot. So it definitely is a concern there. But do you have any other thoughts with the Alvarez catching situation?
No, I think we can move on.
So let's discuss the other injuries just to get the injuries stuff out of the way. Brandon Nimmo as well ended up getting an injection, and they're going to see how things are. They don't think it's going to linger into opening day. So that's at least the good news. The bad news is, even if it doesn't, he's going to be behind compared to everyone else. So you do have to worry about potentially a slow start with Brandon Nimmo, but just thought I would, bring that up. And then the other injury news in terms of the lineup before we get to the pitching stuff. Starling Marte, probably not going to be ready for opening day. Not a surprise there, especially when they picked up Canario, who doesn't have minor league options. It kind of seemed like the writing was on the wall that Marte was not going to be ready for opening day. This thing with Marte, though, is what's driving me absolutely insane. So the injury from last year is apparently still lingering. So he came back not 100% when they did not even need him to be going out there. I mean, at 80%, he's just not good enough right now. And then he comes back probably less than that, even playing. They might have to make a decision to just cut him, because either that or he's going to spend the entire year on the IL, because this guy's just never healthy, and it's the knees, if I'm not mistaken, as well. I get that he's going to be a DH, but the guy's just not healthy. Your thoughts with all this? It's just ridiculous, though. I don't want to go on a rant. Stop me from going on a rant here.
Yeah, I mean, he played yesterday, and he ended up hitting a double down the left field line. So I guess positive actions there out of Starling Marte. But yeah, I mean, Carson's brought up before. When you have a $20 million DH who's most of the time, and again, it's not even a full time DH like what JD Martinez was last year. He's going to be platooning with Jesse Winker. He's going to get the lefty. Martinez going to get the lefties, and Jesse Winker's going to get the righties. So, and you talk about a guy that you can't even play the outfield anymore, because I mean, okay, you can stick him out there, but you're basically hoping and praying that the ball doesn't get hit to Starling Marte, because he's an absolute statue out there in right field. I mean, sure, does he still have a great arm? Absolutely, but it doesn't mean anything if he can't move and catch a ball. So, or even move to intercept the ball from getting into the gap. So yeah, it's unfortunate. And again, it's $20 million that could have prevented the Mets from going out there and getting another big time pitcher, or getting possibly another big time bat, or even adding more options to the bullpen. And it's the same thing we talk about with Jeff McNeil now. Look, Jeff McNeil's not an injury concern, but $15 million, and you're getting, I guess, versatile defense and a subpar bat. Again, it's not good enough. I mean, right there, that's $35 million basically in dead weight, which again you could use towards other parts of the roster. But again, we thank the brilliant Billy Epler for giving out those two contracts. It is what it is. I mean, if they have to give him the Robinson Cano treatment of just DFAing him at the start of the season like they did to Cano in 2022, then I guess you do it and you eat the money. But I mean, again, Cohen's talked about how they're already tight up there with the budget, so now they cut him, they still got to pay him, and then you have to go out there and find the replacement. I know Carson brought up the point yesterday, potentially, because the Angels are going to end up sucking no matter what this year, because that's just what the Angels do. So I don't know, maybe if a Jorge Soler is out there and available at the trade deadline, that's a guy who you go out there and get as a right-handed DH replacement. But yeah, it's just unfortunate. Listen, I hope Marte is able to come back and be healthy and produce. But even then, like as a right-handed DH, and sure, he hit well during the playoffs last year. I'm not going to deny that. But as a DH, you need power, and this is a guy in Starling Marte who hasn't hit a home run since June last year. So it's not good enough.
Yeah, I'm not even gonna get into this because it just angers me, this whole thing with Marte. In terms of the pitching side of things, with injuries, Christian Scott, who underwent Tommy John surgery, has begun throwing again, which is definitely interesting. I feel like that's more ahead than I would think for him, but he's still probably not going to pitch this year, still a long ways away. But good to hear that he is at the very least throwing. And then the only other thing, and yeah, I'm rooting against my own players, Carson. Yeah. And then the last bit of news with the injury bug is Shaw Mania, who's probably going to start the year on the IL. Still have to wait and see when he's going to begin throwing again, but hopefully that's soon because the longer this goes, the more I'm going to be worried because of the timeline being pushed back. But those are just the injuries there with the pitching side things. So hopefully nothing more. And I don't think we've got an update on Montas either, which that's not expected though because we heard that he was going to be shut down for quite a bit. So
Yeah.
not surprised to not hear anything. And then I think the only other thing I'm missing injury wise is that AJ Minter, he's throwing, should be ready for opening day. Daniel Nunez throwing, should be ready for opening day. So a little behind, but with relievers, it's a little bit easier to be behind. So um, yeah, not much to worry about there, hopefully, going forward. But do you have any final thoughts with the injury stuff or
No, I can move on.
we'll discuss the highlights of spring training thus far in terms of the pitching side of things as Max Kranick, who's I want to spend most of the time discussing. Once again today threw a scoreless inning, had what, 2 strikeouts today as well
Yeah.
in that scoreless inning. Congratulations. You won a roster spot in my eyes.
Yeah, we have become Max Kranick truthers. We are fully bought into the Max Kranick hype. I mean, the guy has been simply amazing in spring training so far. He's pitched 10 innings so far, no runs given up. I think 5 strikeouts and 3 walks, or maybe a couple more strikeouts than that. Or maybe it was 10 strikeouts. I don't know. The guy has been absolutely electric so far. I mean, and I think probably his role, even though I would like to see him get a starting rotation spot, but most likely he's going to get a spot in the bullpen as like a multi-inning guy, which I mean, it's a good role for him because we saw last year with the Mets, they had multiple guys, in that role. I mean, you had Reed Garrett at the start of the year being a multi-inning guy, then it moved to Jose Budo being a multi-inning guy, and then they used Dedno Nunez as a multi-inning guy too until he ended up getting an injury. So if you add another type of guy like that into your bullpen and Max Kranick, and I really like Kranick's stuff too. His fastball, I mean, it sits around 95, 96, but he generates so much swings and misses off that fastball. I forgot which game it was. I think it was maybe last week. I forgot who they played, but I think he generated 100% whiff rate on the fastball, which is which is just insane. And it's like I said, it's not even an overpowering fastball either, but it's got a ton of good movement and decent velocity on it. And then he's also got a solid slider too, which generates a lot of swings and misses too. And then he's got a nice little curveball to add on to it too. But I'm not a really nice 3 pitch mix, and it's another gem found by Mitts. And we really can't be surprised by this because it just seems like every other week that David Stearns finds another gem. And what a find by Max Kranick. And like you said, he's got himself a roster spot in the bullpen on opening day.
Yeah, and we talked about last week that it does say something that he was on the playoff roster last year for a bit. Didn't pitch, but he was there. And so far the spring stats, 8 innings of work, 5 hits allowed, 10 strikeouts. So him being that multi-inning reliever is going to be huge for this bullpen, especially because I think this will help a lot with preventing Budo from being ran into the ground because I think towards the end of last year, you just really saw the wheels fall off of Budo because of how much he was worked. And, he was in the circle of trust with Edwin Diaz. Basically, it was just him and Diaz down the stretch, and then a bit of Phil Maton, before the playoffs I'm talking about here. Down the home stretch of the regular season, it was really those 3 guys, and Budo just got ran into the ground here. And I think that letting Kranick potentially be a piggyback, or a fallback option, if you will, to Jose Budo needing to go multiple innings, I think that will help out tremendously here. I wish that Kranick was able to start because he has the stuff to start. It's just that health wise, I don't think they want him starting, unfortunately. But yeah, it's just everything's grading out, grading out so well. Just everything is the four seam is ridiculous. The slider's ridiculous. Just everything that he's done so far this spring has been unbelievable, and it's got to a point where he's must watch with these games right now. Like we are seated anytime he's pitching.
Yeah, I mean, I even put it on Twitter today. I'm like, oh, Max Kranick's pitching today. I will definitely be locked into this random spring training game on March 11th, just because I got to watch my guy Max Kranick dice up opposing batters at the plate. But no, I mean, but again, this is like what we were talking about before. This is why we brought David Stearns here for the bullpen to find under the radar, cheap depth guys like this. And this is what teams like the Braves have been doing, what the Dodgers have been doing, what the Rays have been doing, and this is how you build sustainability because, like you said, you don't you don't want to go out there and overpay for bullpen guys because bullpen guys are so not only fragile but they're so inconsistent from year to year. You could have a guy be great one year and then absolute ass the next year, like we saw with a guy like Aaron Loop. 2021 was amazing for the Mets, signs with the Angels, which I mean, it's not a coincidence how they because the Angels just mess up pitchers in general, but he goes out to Anaheim and has a shit year. So and again, you find these cheap under the radar guys, you plug them into your bullpen, and even like David Stern says, bullpens are versatile. So you're going to need a ton of guys like this on your roster and on your 40 man and just depth throughout the roster because Max Kranick may be here for the start of the season, and then turn the page to July and August, he might not be here, which I don't think will be the case because I think he has the stuff to stay here and cement the bullpen spot for the whole year. But it's nice to see what he's been doing in spring training.
Yeah, hopefully there's less turnover with the bullpen this year compared to last year because somehow it was Edwin Diaz and not with him, but somehow Adam Ottavino was the only other guy to survive the entire season. So hopefully we're not in a scenario where we're dealing with that. But yeah, I mean, the bullpen option so far, I mean, Ryan Stanek has had a very solid spring as well so far. It's been limited what we've seen from him, but it's definitely exciting to see that he's been solid.
Reed
Jose
Garrett
Budo,
looked good.
Reed Garrett's looked good. Jose Budo, it's been limited, but decent from him. Really, the only guys that have kind of looked shaky is that could be on the opening day roster is a guy like Danny Young, who didn't look great. Jose Urania absolutely
Yeah,
shit the bed today,
got
which
destroyed.
yeah, which that was a guy that maybe could have been filling in for a couple starts if need be. After today, I don't know if I want him in the bullpen even. So, yeah, we'll see there. But outside of that, the guys that are probably going to make opening day, like Minter and Nunez, we just haven't seen. So it's hard to gauge there. But yeah, just hopefully less turnover with the bullpen this year compared to last year. And then the starting pitching, though, Clay Holmes yet again was unbelievable. 50% whiff rate in his last start, and I believe it was like a 70% whiff rate on the changeup in that last start, which looks absolutely filthy. And there were concerns early on in training camp here that he was tipping his pitches a bit. He clearly got all that resolved because he had 8 strikeouts in 3 2/3 innings. I'm so excited to see Clay Holmes come opening day. Like I'm sorry, it's getting to a point where he might be the opening day starter for me. I'm sorry. Like I love Senga, but Clay Holmes right now has earned it. And I think that the urgency that he has shown, because he was there before everyone else. He arrived to Port St. Lucie before pretty much everyone else. It tells me that he really wants to he's really serious about his training ramping up to be a starter, and it tells me that this experiment is going to work better than we thought it would.
Yeah, he's so fun to watch out there. And I'm happy that, we bought in early to the Clay Holmes hype. And so far, I mean, obviously things could still turn, but so far it's looking very good for the Clay Holmes hype. And I'm all here for it. You're all here for it, and I can't wait to see this guy pitch, throughout the regular season. And I hope that when we go to the home opener against the Blue Jays, I hope he's the guy out there starting because I really want to see this guy up close and live pitching because I mean the guy's been incredible. I mean, even his last start, he went 3 2/3 innings, and And the thing that I really liked was he wasn't really even the sharpest either, because he had some trouble locating with the fastball early a little bit, but the changeup was there. That kick change has looked really good so far. Has generated a lot of swings and misses. The slider sweeper has looked good so far. The four seamer, around 95, 96. I know he topped out a little bit, 97, 98 a little bit. So that's nice to see that the velo's up there too. He's also worked on incorporating a cutter into his repertoire. So because right now I think he's thrown like six different pitches throughout spring
6,
training
yeah.
so far. Yeah, so it's really nice to see that he's gone from three pitches where he was throwing with the Yankees in the bullpen spot to now all of a sudden he's throwing six. Because I mean, adding three pitches in that short amount of time in spring training, and I'm sure he was working on it a bit in the offseason, but still in that relatively short time, adding three pitches and the fact that all three look really effective, that's a really good sign. And yeah, I mean, he's been generating a lot of strikeouts, a lot of swings and misses. Ground ball. He's been getting a lot of soft contact on the ground balls. So he's looked really good. And the Clay Holmes jersey might have to be purchased. I can't lie; it might have to be added to the collection.
Yeah, to put into perspective how insane it is though with the pitches, 55% of his pitches last year they threw was his sinker that he utilized. Now he's uh deep in the toolbox here to have, like you mentioned, six pitches. It's absolutely insane how he was able to get all this done in the offseason. And I thought that he was just going to end up adding the changeup in the four seam, but to see him add a cutter too, just is even more, makes me feel more comfortable that if, because my biggest fear right now still is once it's deeper in the games and once he has to go through the batting order a third time, how he's going to utilize the tools, which that could be a little bit of something he has to navigate early on, how he utilizes the tools. But I definitely feel comfortable now that he has at least a lot of the tools where he could work through this, where if he does have to go through an order a third or fourth time, I feel good about him, working through it and getting those outs and eating those innings that are needed, and especially because of the fact that this rotation desperately needs those innings.
Yeah, they definitely need innings, and I still think we could see a little bit of adjustment period to start the year, because he's averaging right now about like 3 innings, 3 and a third innings in spring training so far. But when you ramp it up to 6 innings now for a regular season game, we could see a bit of adjustment with the fatigue and the stamina. But it does also help the fact, like you said, that going from three pitches in your repertoire to six pitches in your repertoire, now that that gives you a whole nother thing to work with now. So because it generally, if you're a starting pitcher and you only have three pitches to work with, guys can generally catch on really quickly, unless like you have the most nasty stuff like DeGrom, because DeGrom really relied on fastball, slider, and curveball or a changeup, and most of the time he was just working on with fastball and slider. But his stuff was so ridiculous that it didn't even matter that he was really going through two pitches. But a guy like Clay Holmes, where even though he has really good stuff, not anywhere close to Jacob DeGrom type stuff, but the fact that now that you upgraded from three pitches to six really good pitches, now that really you're keeping the opposing batters on their toes throughout the whole game, because they don't know what type of pitch is coming.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback off of the conversation with Kranick before too, I think having Kranick and Budo, both guys that could go multiple innings, will help baby Clay Holmes a little bit into the role, to where also my biggest concern still is how this is going to hold up through an entire season, because you're talking about a guy that has not started in a very long time, since before people were wearing masks. We're talking about a guy that, you know, just again isn't used to this workload at all. I think letting him slowly marinate into the role is the way to do it still. Like, even if he's looking good through 5, 6 innings in his first few starts, I wouldn't be hesitant to pull the plug on him early in these games, just to preserve his arm for later on when it matters the most, unless you really need him to go because the bullpen's taxed. But I just would like to see them do that, because that's still my biggest concern, is how this is going to hold up through the whole season, because we saw Sean Manaea last year kind of get burnt out a little bit towards the end of the season. That is a guy that was more used to a starting pitching workload. We're talking about a guy that's not as used to it as of lately. So I'd like to see them really just be careful in that regard with that.
Yeah, I think the big thing with that is just going to be balance. How they ultimately, how how Mendy handles it, because again, like you do kind of want to baby Clay Holmes a little bit and ease him into it, but also you don't want to burn out the bullpen early, and that's a concern that we had last year. The Mets got off to such a bad start where they more had to rely on their top bullpen guys, and the fact that also that guys like Manaya and guys like Sevy, and you also had a basically a punt day every day with Adrian Hauser on the mound. When those guys weren't giving you innings, and now you got to rely on your bullpen, to get you a majority of the outs throughout the game. It's going to burn out your bullpen, and obviously, we saw it later in the year with the bullpen by the time the playoffs got there, and by the time they got to the Dodgers series, it was just either you can rely on guys or their arms are just burnt out. And then we also saw a ton of injuries throughout the year with like Reed Garrett, Jose Budo, Dednell Nunez, guys like that. So it's all about balance and how they're going to figure it out. And luckily, I mean, for us, we have a good manager in Carlos Mendoza. It's his second year, and I think he's fully capable of handling a bullpen.
Speaking of the starting pitching, another guy that did look um relatively good was Griffin Canning in yesterday's game. The four seam still not at all looking great, but the good part about what he did is that one, he toned back the four seam usage, which is something that when he signed, we talked about that, or more, we talked about it more so in our apology live stream versus the actual live stream, because the actual live stream we were just flat out ripping the signing. But in our apology one, we were talking about, okay, if you cut back the four seam usage, maybe this could work, because forget about the velo, but it is just, there's just not enough. The shape of it's just not good. The shape of the four seam is not good at all. He needed to implement a couple of other pitches there, and he definitely did that in yesterday's start. Utilized the changeup a good amount, utilized the slider, which graded out very well, which is encouraging. I'd like to see him maybe up the sweeper usage a bit more, because that it did grade well. Didn't throw a lot of it, but it did. So maybe that's something that they could utilize to help him get a couple more innings out of him. But encouraging stuff. It's a spring training start, but definitely encouraging considering how we feel still about Griffin Canning. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to turn around and put up ace numbers like I think Clay Holmes could, but I think there could be a world where he could, give serviceable 5 starter numbers, which is all you could ask for. Just again, as long as you still see those adjustments continue with limiting the four seam.
Definitely, he looked good in his last well, not last start, or did he start? I'm not sure, but he pitched 3 really solid innings against the Cardinals, and yeah, like you mentioned, cut back on the fastball, because I mean the fastball shape's not great, and in modern day MLB, when your fastball is averaging out to about 92, 93 miles an hour, it's not great, and to rely on that as your number one pitch, it's not going to work, and the results are not going to be great either. But he toned back on the fastball. It was the fastball actually was still decent yesterday. He did get a decent amount of swings and misses on that. Just mix it up here and there. I know he kind of also threw a cutter there too, so that could have also added to it. And now I don't know if the Cardinals were just asked that day and they just couldn't hit, or that fastball might have something. But yeah, no, I thought his slider was the best pitch he was throwing out there. I would like to see more of that. Sinker looked good. Changeup looked really good as well. And yeah, I mean, for a guy like Griffin Canning, I mean, for a guy that we signed for $4.5 million, I'm not saying he has to put up this level of production, but if he could go out there, because right now probably to start the season with the injuries to Montas and Manaya, Canning is probably going to be he's probably going to have a starter role in either the 4 or 5, along with either one of Blackburn or McGill. Listen, ideally, I would like to see Canning as a long man guy out of the bullpen, or like a multi-inning guy like Max Kranick. But if he could start the year as a 4 or 5, and he's giving you 5, 6 innings at around a 4 ERA, 4.25, 4.5, I think you take that out of a guy like Griffin Canning.
Yeah, I agree with you that I think that still the tools are better utilized for the bullpen compared to a starting pitching role. And I mean, we're seeing it right now. Like, he's getting by in the short innings. The real concern is going to be when he has to go through, a couple more innings as a starting pitcher. So once this team's healthy, I'd still like to see him in the bullpen. That doesn't change. But definitely a little bit of encouraging signs there. And then also encouraging signs was Tyler McGill today. Honestly, I thought Tyler McGill actually looked very solid for the most part today. It doesn't change how I feel about him, but because he's Mr. March after all. We have to remember that. But encouraging what we saw from Tyler McGill today.
Yeah, Tyler McGill, Silor McGill. Such a frustrating topic because he's basically like if Brett Beatty's if man for the position players, Tyler McGill's if man for the pitching side because he does this every year. He gives you one or two good starts, looks good, and then the tools just fall off. Spring training, he actually, I think, apart from, I think it was a outing against the Astros or the Cardinals, he kind of struggled a little bit. He's looked fine out of his other starts. I mean, he's put up a 1.5 ERA so far in spring training. So on that part, he looks good, and he was generating a lot of swings and misses today with his multiple pitches that he was throwing. It's just, and like I said, he's probably going to get a starter role at the start of the year because of the Manaea and Montas injuries, but it's frustrating with McGill because I really want to buy in. I really want to buy into it, and I want to believe in him, but we've seen the movie way too many times. He looks good, and then the wheels come off the bus.
Yeah, that's the problem is that like he's someone that's hard to get excited about because of the fact that it's just we see this every single spring training and even in April he'll show signs of looking good and then the wheels just fall off like you're mentioning. He looked promising today. All we could do is hope that it carries over because I mean he was dotting up Jordan Alvarez
Yeah.
today. He was looking really good today. And it's just again, could this please carry over for once? He's another guy though that, profile similar to I should say profile similar, but like I view him in the same light as Canning, where it's like, please just make this guy a reliever because I think he'd be such a good reliever like his brother, but
Yeah.
they just won't do it and they can't do it because of the injuries to the starting pitching. But hopefully, once the great Starry Marte is gone and they can afford more starting pitching, maybe you could start to see guys like Tyler McGill actually shift to a bullpen role where they belong and, all these other guys. But so far, very good news on the pitching front, which expected a little bit with Stearns at the helm, but also it's good because I think the bigger concern was the pitching compared to the offense, where the offense did start slow, but now they're starting to heat up a little bit, which is definitely encouraging. So a lot of good there in that regard. But do you have
Yeah.
anything else to bring up with the pitching before we talk about the offensive side of things?
No, I was gonna say the frustrating part with McGill is like even though he hasn't fully put it together here, you just know that if he were to go somewhere like Tampa, they would figure it out with him, and he'd become like this really dominant, maybe not a starter, but this really dominant multi-inning reliever guy. Or like if he went to Milwaukee, for example, and teamed up with his brother, the stuff it's because like the stuff is there. He could be a really good reliever, but they just don't want to make him a reliever. I mean, listen, I hope for him that, he starts the season in the rotation and he pitches really well and it just continues throughout the whole year. But I have to see it to believe it.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It's just one of those things where it's you have to see it to buy in. And no, Montas is
Yeah.
not going to be a reliever when he comes back. The only way Montas should be a reliever,
Playoffs
um, when what'd you say?
for playoffs.
That and the only way when he comes back that he should be a reliever at all is if everyone in the rotation is just like putting up ridiculous numbers to where there's just simply no room for him. But unfortunately, that part's highly unlikely, especially with Paul Blackburn existing. So, that's not going to happen, which he's the biggest downside to the whole pitching side of things is that absolutely sucks. Would not care if they release him tomorrow. Sorry. Um, I won't shit on him too much. I already did all that last year when they acquired him. I still don't understand it, but either way. And then, for this to answer, we'll talk about the lineup and stuff. Will Diaz have a big season and save a lot of games? Hopefully,
We
hopefully. But
need
I
them.
also don't hate if they don't have to use if he doesn't get a lot of saves and it's because there's someone else in the bullpen that is doing just as good as him. So I'll say that is that like if AJ Minter is lights out from the pen, or our goat Denel Nunez is doing what he did last year, you don't have to rely on Diaz as much, which would be very helpful because I don't want this to be what it was last year in the playoffs, where it's just Diaz, Stanek, and then half of Reed Garrett
Half
held
of
by
yeah.
duct tape.
Yeah, I mean, even the point with Diaz is like, again, you don't have to use him in the ninth inning. You could use him in the eighth inning or seventh inning when the bigger guys in the opposing lineup come up.
Yeah.
Like again, and I think the best kind of bullpen is like closer by committee. Whoever's on it at that point should be given the closer role or should be given the opportunities to face the bigger bats in the opposing lineup.
Yeah. That's something that they have to do because there were times where Phil Maton was getting the better part of the order. And it's like, I like what Mendoza did in this first year, but there were too many times he was doing and that's the one knock I had on him last year is that like Phil Maton would get the top of the order instead. It's just what are you doing there, putting him in? Who a guy that just does not have the stuff to face that part of the order at all. So hopefully, the bullpen's deeper to where they don't have to rely on Diaz. But if he does have a big year and a lot of saves, then hopefully, that's happening while the bullpen is still thriving at a good level. But I have high expectations with the bullpen. Maybe I'm wrong for that but last year I thought the bullpen was funny enough one of the better parts of the team going into the year. I was very wrong about that one. So uh hopefully I'm right this time with the bullpen, but I think there's definitely more depth and certainty with the bullpen to where we could be more comfortable with that. So we'll segue into the lineup side of things. Juan Soto hit a home run
What
again.
else is new?
Didn't even get a hold of the ball a lot.
So
I can't believe
beautiful,
he's a
man.
Met every time. Every time I watch him do something in a Mets jersey, I still can't believe it. And this is spring training.
I've never been so because every day, like when I go to the home, or not every day, but every year when I go to the home opener or opening day, I always look forward to hearing Howie Rose do the on field introductions. I've never been so excited to hear the Juan Soto introduction because I'm telling you, like Lindor's gonna get a big ovation. Pete's obviously gonna get a big ovation for coming back, but City Field's gonna explode and shake when Howie Rose introduces Juan Soto's name on during the home opener. It's gonna be crazy.
Yeah, I think in general, I think the home opener is going to be a playoff type atmosphere this year. I truly believe that, especially if they could get off to a good start on the road. I think that the crowd is going to be hungry to watch this team. And a lot of that's obviously because of Soto. Lindor, who hopefully could replicate what he did after, being put in the leadoff spot last year. And, he had a little bit of a slower start to the spring, which does suck, but he's definitely been performing a little bit better as of lately. Went 0 for 4 yesterday, as I say that, but still, outside of that, I mean, it's definitely been a little bit better with his performances lately. Just please no slow start. The real thing that we have to talk about with the lineup. No, it's not Mark Vientos, who also hit a home run, by the way, which is great.
Hit a
But
home
it's
run back to back days. So
what can't he do? Don't say defend, but what can he do? The real conversation here, of course, with the lineup is the bench and talking about second base. I don't know where to go because there's no one that's winning me over entirely right now. There really isn't. I will say one thing, Carson, cover your ears. I want to vomit saying it too, believe me. But if you're even still here, but I don't know. Jeff McNeil, that hit yesterday. I won't take it away from him yesterday. I'm talking just yesterday. It was the Cardinals. I don't remember who was on the mound,
I
but
think it was Sonny Gray.
I that it was a nice hit there, but it was just one hit. Brett Beatty is like we talked about before, what if man, where we talk about McGill being Mr. March. Brett Beatty is even more Mr. March than him, where I don't know how I feel. And then Acuna, he's got off to a bit of a slow start too. Looked all right today, but this kind of leads with this question: do we think Beatty deserves an everyday role in the lineup? No, I'm not there. He's like Tyler McGill, where I have to see it to believe it. It's just unfortunate at that point. I want to believe in Beatty. I want Beatty to be good, but I just can't buy in until I see it happen in the big leagues for more than 1 or 2 weeks.
Brett Beatty. Oh, Brett Beatty. If this doesn't work out, bro, better give me back my $150 that I spent on his jersey. But no, on a real talk, yeah, he doesn't deserve a starting spot. He just listen. He's had really good springs before, and he's had a decent spring this year. The defense has gotten better. However, he has not shown that he could hit major league pitching at a consistent rate. He's shown a little spurts that he could get hot here for a week or two, but through the long run of a multi-week, multi-month stint that he's been up here in the majors, he's struggled most of the time he's been up here. And listen, I think right now, if I was to put my money on it, I'd say Brett Beatty is probably in line to get the final the final bench spot and get that 26-man role. Because right now, I think Jeff McNeil is going to get the starting spot at second base just because he's a veteran and he's making $15 million. So he's going to get the starting job so far at second base to at least start the year. If he gets off to a slow start and he's struggling, then I don't think Stearns is going to be hesitant to pull the plug on him starting, and then he'll just move to the bench. But then, you're going to have $35 million on your bench, which not great. Thanks again, Billy Epler. But yeah, for me, I can't say that Brett Beatty should deserve the starting job at second base right now. Like I said, he's going to get the 26-man role. He's going to be the final bench spot. So he'll get that. And if McNeil struggles, then Brett Beatty, there you go. That's your opportunity. Go out there and go take it. But until he does that, then no, he shouldn't get the starting spot. And then with Acuna, we'll see. He's had an iffy spring training so far. He's going to go down to AAA, and let's see how he produces there.
Hey, what about Donovan Walton, who hit a grand slam today? What about Donovan Walton? But yeah, we're gonna go in circles here with the conversation from last episode, but it's just my problem still with this whole thing is that one of Acuna or Beatty are going to rot on the bench, and it's not good for their development. It's just not good for their development at all. And that's where I still have a hard time with all of this. I just don't know where you go from here. And Mauricio's not going to be ready for opening day. And even if he was ready, I think they would start him in AAA just to give him time to fully rehab and get to game shape. But that's still my problem with all this is one of these guys are going to rot on the bench when it's not good for either of them to take a step forward at all.
You know what? To be fair though, like Brett Beatty is such he's in such a weird position because at AAA, like there's really no more development for Brett Beatty at AAA. We know he mashes when he gets down there. We know he hits nukes. We know the average is high down there at AAA. So it's like at that point, because through his first 4 years of 3.5 years of being a major leaguer, he's shown that if there's anything about Brett Beatty is that he's a quadruple A player so far because he raised down in AAA and then he comes up to the MLB, maybe has a good 1 or 2 weeks and then sucks. So at that point, it's like Because at least with Acuna, Acuna's not had a big enough sample yet at AAA and both the MLB to say like, okay, let me put him on my 26 man as the last bench spot. No, let Acuna go, even though he showed flashes last year towards the end of the year when he came up and produced. Let him go down to AAA, and that's a guy that can still develop. But with Beatty, I don't know how much development there is. I mean, really, you just got to give him a roster spot and see what happens. And then, like I said, if McNeil struggles and Beatty gets awarded the second base spot, then listen, that's your spot to take, because ultimately, I think this is Beatty's last chance to really cement this place here as a Met. Because I think if he has another bad year, or if he comes up here, struggles, goes back to AAA, and then can't come back here, he's going to be gone next year. So really, for him, this is his last opportunity.
Unless we think outside the box for a second here. And the only other thing that I think could be possible in all of this is, because we're talking about how useless Starling Marte is,
Put him to the
maybe
outfield.
I wasn't even going to say that. I was going to say that the days that Starling Marte would DH, you let Vientos DH and you put Brett Beatty at
The
third.
third.
That's that's another alternative there. But then again, it's like that has to be if Marte's not ready for opening day, because you can't have a $20 million player that just is cheerleading in the dugout at that point, because then he just literally has no role. And the only other problem with that is, if you wanted to get Winker into a game late, then he's going to be stuck playing the field, and you're going to have to shift things around in a weird way to where, like, Brandon Nimmo might have to play center field because you don't want to take his offense out. So that's the only problem with that. But you might not have a choice there, because where's Brett Beatty getting the at bats is the other problem here, because they're gonna trust McNeil more. I don't know where you get the at bats from Beatty. I just don't.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing, I mean, if you talk about like, DHing another guy on an off day, I mean, you could do the same thing, because I think Beatty's played a little bit of first also. So if you want to DH Pete and then you put Beatty at first for a game, I guess you could do that. But I I I think for Beatty right now, he's in a spot where he just has to take this versatile last man on the bench spot and either play third, second, first, or even the outfield if he has to. And then, like I said, if McNeil struggles and second base opens up, he's got to take that opportunity. Other than that, he's not really going to get a lot of starting time either, or a lot of playing time at that point. So he's got to be careful with this playing time, because he has to take advantage of a few small opportunities he's going to get.
Yeah, I guess the question really will come down to how long of a leash they give to Jeff McNeil, because if it's anything like last year, then Brett Beatty, it's just like there's no point in being here. He's not going to even touch the field at all, and he's going to be the designated cheerleader, because there's just no room if they're giving McNeil that long of a leash again, which hopefully just isn't the case, because I can't stand it if he's struggling the way he did last year. I just can't.
He's got a new batting stance though.
Yippee. Um, let's see if there's anything else so in the chat before we wrap up the episode here. Do we like Alonso batting before Soto when the season starts?
No.
No, and that's not going to happen, which we already have the confirmed top 5 of the order at least. So when there is I'm trying to remember which way it is. I think when there's a lefty on the mound, it's going to be, if I'm not
The
mistaken, Lindor, Soto,
Alonso.
Alonso, Nimmo, Vientos. And then when there's, it could be the other way around, but the top 5 is going to be Lindor, Soto, Alonso, and then depending on if it's a lefty or a righty, it will be Vientos or Nimmo hitting 4th, and then whoever isn't hitting 4th will hit 5th. One of those 2 ways. That's the top
Yeah.
5 of the order.
Yeah, let me see if I can pull up the tweet. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to go through Underdog right now.
Yeah, go ahead and try and find that there, because I'm not quite sure which way it was, but that's going to be the batting order, and I think that's the way to do it. You leave Soto in the 2 hole where he was last year. You leave Lindor leading off for sure. and you could always tweak things. I wouldn't hate if later on in the season, if they decide to make a switch with Alonso and Soto and then put, have Soto bat third and Alonso hit second. But for opening day, I think it makes sense to start
Okay,
with
yeah.
that
So,
order.
all right, so I got it. So, plan 5 from MLB Underdog according to John Heyman. So, Lindor, Pete, Soto's your 1, 2, and 3, and then Vientos will bat fourth against lefties, and then Nimmo will bat fourth against righties, and then whoever out of those two then will bat fifth.
All right, so I think I had it backwards there. So there you go. For righties, you said it's Vientos.
No, for righties it's Nimmo.
Oh,
For lefties it's Vientos,
okay. Yeah.
which
That's
makes
a
sense
little weird
because
though.
well, no, I mean it makes sense because Nimmo's a lefty, so he's gonna get the righties, and Vientos is a righty, so he's gonna get the lefties.
The only reason I think that's weird is because of the fact that if there's a lefty and Nimmo's hitting fifth, Winker's gonna hit
So
seventh because
seventh, yeah.
do you want to double up on the lefties there? 5 and 6? Unless things change now that Alvarez hurt, because maybe their plan was Alvarez would hit um or no. What am I saying? Because Marte's gonna be in the lineup. I don't
Yeah.
know why I even said that. Yeah, no, Marte's gonna be in the lineup, not Winker. Never mind. That makes complete sense then. I still do have the fear of Alonso and Vientos hitting back to back because those are two guys that chase and swing and miss a lot. So I'm not gonna lie, I still worry about that. But we'll see how that goes. I mean, again, it's just the opening day lineups. Things could always shift around if they need to and if they want to. Because like I said, I wouldn't hate if they did switch Alonso and Soto around at one point, or if Nimmo is the cleanup hitter every game, or if Vientos is whatever works. I don't give a shit. Just find what works. And I just hope it's not a situation like last year where we don't know the lineup going into the postseason.
Yeah, just score runs, and I think the top of this lineup is good enough to just go out there and just mash. So whatever works works.
Yeah. So we'll see, as we are again only about 2 weeks away from opening day. Next week for the podcast, can't tell you. I don't know which day yet it's going to be, but we will give predictions, Mets predictions, MLB predictions, and then it will be opening day, and we will get to actually talk about some games. We'll start doing our episodes after each series, so that'll be a lot better than the structure or lack thereof structure right now, with these episodes, both with the format of them and then where they're scheduled. At least it'll be easier. And then we will be, of course, bringing you post game episodes after each game, or at least most games. Sometimes it might be a recording, sometimes it might be live. Who the hell knows? So that is going to be it, though, for us. Thank
Well,
you for tuning.
one more thing, because we have to give a nice little send off because Jose Iglesias has finally signed with the team. He is a San Diego Padre, so thank you to Jose Iglesias for everything that he did last year. Thank you for the OMG. The vibes are fantastic. I hope him nothing but the best in San Diego. And yeah, I hope that he gets a nice little tribute and a nice little round of applause from the fans at Citi Field when the Padres come to Citi Field.
I hate that you brought it up, because every time I see Iglesias post now and he's in his Padres gear with the OMG song on his story, it's like watching your ex move on right away and kissing another guy. It's that feeling right now with this. And again, I hate getting this emotionally attached with a debt player nonetheless, but it was special to them. But I still stand by what I've said, that it's probably better to move on for this team, just because of the fact that you know it it's a new season. Leave the gimmicks behind, and turn the page to be a real contender. But I obviously still will miss. Obviously, I'll miss Iglesias. I'll miss him, and hopefully he does get a standing ovation when he comes back, and hopefully they play the song as well. Honestly, for out of
Definitely.
any depth player that deserves a video tribute,
It's
he's the
Jose,
one
yeah.
guy.
Oh, he's getting a video tribute.
Yeah,
He's getting a video tribute.
he's the one guy that deserves it. So, yeah, now that we end on a little bit of a heartbreak there. Thank you everyone for tuning in and watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe, turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live, and we'll see you guys in the next one.